1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. I love counting. Whatever the amount.
Hello everybody, it's the Law Gnome and welcome to the February edition of 10 for 12. As I said in 30 anticipated films of 2013, 10 for 12 is a new segment in which I actually will do a top 10 list on a topic of my choosing, and of course the goal is to get comments, feedback, and all that wonderful stuff. So today we're going to go over the 10 movies that changed my life. I did a lot of thinking as far as picking them, and then of course the harder part was even ranking them. Besides a movie that I enjoy watching multiple times and never getting sick of it, a movie that changed my life is a movie that basically brought me closer to the understanding of film rather than just, sitting and watching movies, like knowing and understanding the art form. But more importantly, it also was a gateway, so to speak. Each film represents a gateway to bigger and better things that turned me into the film appreciator and enjoyer that I am today. So we're going to go from 10 to 1, and we're going to start with the first one, which is Batman the Movie, based on the television show starring Adam West and Burt Ward. Now, what makes this movie number 10, even though it's not really one of the greatest movies ever made? Batman the Movie is basically what introduced me to Batman, who is my favorite superhero, and more importantly, the world of comic books and comic book films. This introduced me to the great movies like Richard Donner's Superman and Christopher Nolan's Batman, and let's not forget all the wonderful DCAU television shows that DCAU had and Marvel made, and the Marvel films that led from Iron Man all the way to the Avengers, and even the little hidden treasures like The Mask and the cult classics like The Crow, and the mainstream favorites that people don't even know are comic books like Sin City and Men in Black. So, Batman was my gateway to the world of comic book films, and I love comic book films so much, and I can't say anything more about Batman starring the great Adam West. Number 9, Billy Wilder's directed Some Like It Hot. Known by the AFI as one of the greatest comedies of all time, starring Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. This movie is a real gateway to me knowing that there was more out there in the world of film than just the stupid little thing I forced my parents to take me to, or the typical Disney movie, and we'll get to that later. But Some Like It Hot was an understanding that there were movies way back then. And not only were there were good movies. And throughout time, I got to see other Billy Wilder's classics like The Great Sunset Boulevard, and I saw other movies like The Graduate, The Ten Commandments, Exodus, The Godfather. I still need to see Lawrence of Arabia and Casablanca, and of course Gone with the Wind. And even great movies that are out there right now, like Forrest Gump or The Silver Linings Playbook even. A movie like Some Like It Hot will bring you into another world and give you another understanding of the fact that movies are most of the time movies, but at the same time there are a couple that are meant to mean something. And it's such a great, funny movie. It was the first time I ever saw Jack Lemmon. He is great in this movie. You've got to see Some Like It Hot if you haven't. Number 8. This is the double pack, yes, but I'm referring to Fantasia, not Fantasia 2000. Yes, I loved Disney movies ever since I was a little boy, but one of the things that I know about Fantasia was it was something different, something original, a movie that showed you that you don't need words to tell a story. It's about music. It also not only led me to understand the rare gems in the world of animation, but it also gave me a very big appreciation of music. And even classical music, and I got an understanding of how music drives all films, and it's fantastic how Fantasia told that story so beautifully. Number 7, Akira. It was brought to the United States in the 80s from the great land that is Japan, giving a few people, and soon an entire group, something new and something fresh. And this was basically my bridge to the world of anime. Akira was something that was so different, so brash, something that took upon stories of Japan of old, and even stories that were brought to the United States, like Ralph Bakshi, who did the very first rated X animated film, showed you that animation didn't necessarily have to be for children. And Akira just gave me the understanding that Anime, while American films are great, anime can tell an incredible, sometimes confusing story. And these days you see a lot of American-made films, probably the most well-known is The Matrix, that really takes the tone of the anime style. And Tarantino, if you take a look at movies like Kill Bill, really takes on the tone of Japanese stories, leading all the way back to the great Akira Kurosawa. Number 6. Jetsons the movie. I am a Jetsons freak. I love everything about this wonderful family from the future. The Jetsons movie, while it's not one of the greatest movies, and while I had seen movies outside of Disney, it was another way to show the world that there are other movies out there that are animated, and they don't necessarily have to be from Disney. Not only did it spread my horizon in regards to looking at directors like Don Bluth's films, and of course going to DreamWorks animated films, but like Akira, it showed me that eventually I would discover that animation is not necessarily child-oriented. Taking a look at things like Bruce Timm's work with Batman the Animated Series, Steven Spielberg's work with Animaniacs, and going all the way to The Simpsons and Family Guy and American Dad and Bob's Burgers and The Oblongs. It showed that animation truly is for everyone. Number 5. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. While I love Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Tim Burton reincarnation of this classic musical film, ironically, it's funny how these two films will connect. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a great heartwarming tale that tells the story that is very child-friendly, but at the same time, a little off-color and a little bit strange. And this is the movie that really got me to understand the fact that while a movie can be beautiful, it can be a little mind-boggling and a little bit strange. Two of the big directors that I am a fan of that are pretty much directly from this movie that was made in 1971, Tim Burton and Guillermo del Toro. Number 4. The Coen Brothers' The Big Lebowski, probably one of the greatest and most intriguing original comedies ever made, starring Jeff Bridges, the greatest performance you'll ever see from John Goodman, John Turturro, Julianne Moore, Steve Buscemi, and the list goes on. What I love about The Big Lebowski is this was the movie that got me to venture out and find the original pieces, like the David Finchers of the world, and the Edgar Wrights of the world, and the Joss Whedons of the world. Like, this movie basically got me to understand directors, and really base my preferences of film on director-driven, rather than actor-driven, or style-driven. But The Big Lebowski is a hysterical comedy. It's been embedded in our pop culture. Now we're getting to the top 3. Number 3. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the John Hughes comedy starring Matthew Broderick, a landmark, a classic, a movie that I hesitated in seeing at first, but my mother said, sit down and watch this movie, you will love it. So instead of going to take my parents to movies like Three Ninjas, I actually developed a taste for the teen comedy, the John Hughes movies of the world, all the way to movies like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and the American Pie trilogy, and Dazed and Confused, and the Kevin Smith line. So this was a groundbreaker, and of course, even going back to the Ivan Reitman produced Animal House. Even the classic teen comedies I started getting into. It also got me a little bit more into the sports comedies that revolved around children, like The Sandlot, or movies like Stand By Me. It was the movie that basically was very young person driven, and all those great movies that involve kids and teenagers as the protagonists, that's pretty much where it all got started for me. Number 2, yeah, it's gotta be at least one of the Star Wars films. The great story about Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope is I was 9 years old, and I wanted to see a movie that the video store didn't have, and we had just gotten back from MGM Studios in Florida, and I loved the Star Tours ride. My mom saw Star Wars on the shelf, and she said, this will shut him up. Star Wars branched me out further into the world of science fiction and fantasy, and what possibly can I say? Movies like Tron, movies like Harry Potter, movies like Transformers, Indiana Jones, and The Matrix, and Lord of the Rings. It just goes on and on and on. This was the movie that started it all, and science fiction and fantasy is my favorite because it's just imaginative, it's completely original, and there's nothing more exciting than going to see a movie in which imagination is running wild. So number 1, Back to the Future. This is the movie that pretty much encompasses all of the stuff that I have mentioned about the previous 9. A fun movie that has a little bit of everything, but the most important thing is Michael J. Fox plays the unlikely hero. He's not muscle-bound, he doesn't have the biggest of brains, he's just an average kid that suddenly realized he has to save the world, to a degree. And he messes up, he stumbles, he figures things out on the fly. Marty McFly is the greatest film character ever created. And if you disagree, I want comments. Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis, another movie that drove me in finding films based on directors. While he may not have had the greatest bunch of films after movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Forrest Gump, this was his masterpiece, all 3 films, and it's a great vision and fun vision of the future. And as they say in that movie, no McFly will ever amount to anything in the history of Hill Valley. They have no idea what they're talking about. I hope you enjoyed the second 10 for 12 of 2013. Looking forward to coming back to you in March, in which I give you the 10 greatest movie moments for me. I will elaborate what I mean by that, but for now, actions speak louder than words.